After I calmed down, I went back and I picked up the book of Daniel, and I went to the end of it, 26th chapter, I think, and 9th chapter of the book of Daniel, and I'm looking around at verse 26, and there's a tremendous statement. Can you all count to 4? 1, 2, 3, 4. Jerusalem shall be destroyed, and the temple by the prince who shall come after the Messiah is cut off. Now remember how I recoiled from that. I didn't want to hear that. Because you see, by this time I already knew that Jerusalem and the temple were both destroyed in the year 70 AD. And I knew that the general of the Roman army was Titus, the son of the emperor Vespasian, and he was a prince. So Jerusalem shall be destroyed, and the city by the prince who shall come after the Messiah is cut off. And what does that say to me? I don't want to believe anything. The last thing in this world that I ever wanted to believe is that Jesus is our Messiah. He may be the Messiah of the Gentiles, but he's not our Messiah. And yet my Bible is telling me about him. Not only where he would be born, not only when he would be born, not only how he would be born, not only when he would die, but what would happen after he died. And here it is. Jerusalem shall be destroyed, and the temple by the prince who shall come after the Messiah is cut off. So either this Bible that I've been studying is nothing more than the story of the Jewish people, or our Messiah came before the year 70. And I got to tell you, friends, I didn't want to read that. I didn't want to think that. I didn't want to have anything to do with that. My whole life had been conditioned on the fact that Jesus is not our Messiah. I was a trustee of the United Jewish Appeal. I was man of the year for the Hebrew Home for the Aged. I was involved in almost every Jewish organization in our city. We lived in a golden ghetto. 85% of my clients were Jewish. How could I possibly begin to think that Jesus really is our Messiah? How could I even conceive that? How could that thought even come into my mind? And I kept pushing it back, pushing it back. Well, fortunately for me, something came up which was going to take me out of the pressure cooker. I had to go to San Francisco to attend a meeting. And so it was on June 14th of 1975. And so my wife said, well, okay, then I'll go up to see Judy, our daughter who was in Boston. And Ann says, well, how about me? I want to go to LA to visit a friend of mine out there. She was graduating from high school, so as a graduation gift, we let her go to Los Angeles. So I'm in San Francisco, Ethel is in Boston, Ann is in Los Angeles. And I'm going to be on a panel with 4 other guys. So we're having a rehearsal of the panel in San Francisco in this hotel. And afterwards we go out for lunch, and somebody says, well, Stan, what do you do for a hobby? I said, well, I'm learning how to play a little bit of golf and this, that, and the other stuff. And I said, what do you do for kicks? He said, well, I'm the secretary of a Bible school. I can't get away from it. So the rest of that afternoon, you know, we were going through a lot of stuff. I was asking question after question after question. Well, to make a long story much shorter, I come home, and I hear there's going to be an international convocation of Messianic Jews. I said, international convocation? All 8 of them are going to come? What? What is an international convocation of Messianic Jews? Well, I was not going to go there. I wouldn't be caught dead in a place like that. So when I got there, late. It's about it's at Messiah College, which is about 2.5 hours away from where I live. And I got there a little bit late, so I couldn't register and go into the first session. I went right into the first session. And there were about 400 or 500 people there. My guess is that close to half of them were Jewish, as far as I could tell. And then, so afterwards, the first session's over, and it was very interesting, and I'm busy looking. I really didn't pay much attention to what the guy was saying. I was busy looking at faces, you know, what are you guys doing here? So the session is now over, and I go register, and I'm on my way to the dorm, okay? So I'm carrying a suitcase with me, and I see this lady who's a really handicapped woman, and she's carrying a briefcase and a suitcase. And I said, good Boy Scout that I am, may I help you? And she said, sure. So we're going in the same direction. I'm carrying her briefcase, she's carrying her suit. I mean, I'm carrying her suitcase, she's carrying her briefcase. And then she turns to me, she says, "Tell me, Stan, for how long have you been a believer?" I said, "Whoa, wait a minute, I'm not a believer, I'm an inquirer." I didn't know at that time that you never tell a believer that you're an inquirer, because the next thing they'll do is say, "Let's sit down and talk." And sure enough, that's what happened. There was a bench there, and she said, "Let's sit down for a minute." I thought she was tired, so we sat down. And she said, "Would you take my Bible out of my briefcase?" Took it out, gave it to her. She said, "No, would you open it?" I said, "Sure, what?" She said, "Would you turn to Exodus chapter 20? Now, again, that's on our side of the Bible, no contest. Right to it. And then she said, "Will you read what it says there? I am the Lord thy God, who delivered thee out of the land of Egypt. Thou shalt have no other gods before me." First commandment. She said, "Close the Bible." So I closed the Bible. And she said, "Tell me, Stan, who is your God?" I said, "I beg your pardon?" She said, "Don't get upset. Who is your God? Who do you spend your time thinking about? Who are you trying to please? What is it that you worship?" And I had this perplexed look on my face, I'm sure. And she said, like your wife, your business, your children, your golf game, your money. What is it you worship? What do you spend your time thinking about? And boy, it was like, boom. Every one of those things is what I spent my time thinking about, instead of the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, the God of my fathers. I knew nothing about him. I knew how to make money. I knew how to make a lot of money. But I didn't know anything about God. And I spent more of my time thinking about these other things than I ever thought about God. I can't tell you a whole lot more about what happened that afternoon, because it's like a big fat blur. I know I met some wonderful people, and we had a dinner together, and I went to a meeting, and I was busy watching faces and listening. But the question she asked me was more important than what they were saying. I couldn't hear what they were saying because I was hearing, reverberating in my spirit, "Who is your God?" And so that night, July 2nd, 1975, I was in the dorm at Messiah College, interestingly enough. And I couldn't sleep. It was probably around 1 o'clock in the morning. And my roommate, a Jewish believer named Art, I could hear him moving around in bed, so I whispered, "Art, are you awake?" He said, "Yes, Dan, what's the matter?" I said, "Would you pray for me?" And that's the first time I'd ever asked anybody to pray for me since just before I went overseas in World War II. I had my grandfather pray for me. But I don't remember what Arthur prayed. It was a simple little prayer, and the next thing I knew, I was up, and it's 6:30 in the morning, and I'm filled with energy, and it's time for breakfast. And there is the group I had dinner with. One of the women, Shirley Moses Byrne, and her husband were there. Shirley's father had been a rabbi in Washington, and she had become an atheist during World War II. How could God permit World War II and the Holocaust to happen? And but now she was an on-fire believer. And so I joined them. They invited me over. As soon as they saw me, they called me over, and I went over and got on the cafeteria line, and we're going through the line. And then we get to the end of the line, we go through, and we sit down at our table. And by this time, I know that you put your tray down, you sit down, and then you wait, because somebody has to pray. So I just sat there with my hands in my lap, and I nodded my head, waiting for somebody to say something. And Shirley turns to me, she says, "Stan, would you lead us in prayer?" What prayers do I know? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Praise that thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who bringest forth bread from the earth. So I prayed that prayer, but you see, by now I know that these people don't stop after a one-sentence prayer. They go on, they talk to God as if he was listening, So I thank God for the food and for these friends and for the night of rest. And then I ended my prayer in Jesus' name. And when I did that, it was like a rocket bursting forth from my inside. Because for a couple of weeks now, I really believed that he is the Messiah. My problem was getting it out of my mouth, getting it from my inner being up out of my mouth, saying it. I was counting the cost. What would my wife think? What would my children? We had decided that we would do individual studies because we influence each other so much. extent of our love for one another, we thought it would be important. Ethel will do her study. I'll do my study. And let's hope that we come out the same place. We'll give each other permission to be wrong, okay? But let's hope we come out in the same place.